So today we're going to be answering the most frequently asked questions I have about making mini cakes like this in a silicone mold. Okay, this is the mold right here. It's got 6 cavities. Each cavity is around 4 inches, so your cakes are going to be 4 inches in diameter, and it cooks a single layer at a time. So you can do 2 layers, you can do 3 layers. I already made some mini cake layers. These are a marble flavor, which is a newer flavor in my Calculator app, and I am going to frost some mini cakes. Okay, so these are the frozen pieces. I just used parchment paper to separate them when they're frozen, so they just come apart really easily. And the first question that I normally get has to do with the amount of batter that you put inside each cavity. So that's gonna depend largely on your cake. Like if you know your cake rises a lot, or if it's kind of like a flatter cake. But for the most part, I don't like to fill each cavity more than 60 or like 2/3 full. You do want the cake to rise above the edge of the pan, because that's gonna allow you to kind of slice that extra part off so that you get like a really nice, like flat layer. So don't worry about if your cake domes, because we just slice that part off. So you don't want it to fall underneath that. So the safe range is usually around 2/3 full for like a from scratch type of cake. If you use box cake, I find that those mixes actually rise a lot, just because I think the companies want it to be kind of foolproof. So they add a lot more leavener. So just err on the side of being kind of like lower than 2/3 when you use box cakes mix, because mine always overflows. Okay, the next question has to do with timing and temperature. So that is going to depend on your cake recipe. But for the most part, my cake recipes, at least the ones that I have in the Calculator, are baked at 350 degrees. And for the timing, you want to think of these cakes as very similar to cupcakes in terms of like the portion. They are a little bit thinner, but my cakes usually bake between 18 to 22 minutes in the middle of an oven at 350 degrees. But you can use any cake recipe you want with this mold, as long as you're comfortable with it, and just use the temperature that's stated in the recipe. And I would start checking your cakes around 15 minutes, but because of the height, I think it's gonna be around 20 minutes for it to get fully cooked, and you can use the skewer test to make sure. Okay, so the next question I've been getting a lot is whether or not you need to grease the pan before you put the batter in so that you can get your cake out really easily. I've not had really any problems when I don't grease the pan. In fact, when I do grease it, I find that what happens is that the cake kind of bakes or kind of like fries in the silicone. So you get a darker crust on your cake, which I don't really like. So I haven't been applying any kind of oil or butter or anything to the inside of the silicone when I bake cakes in them. If you have trouble removing your cake from the silicone, it's probably because your cake isn't fully baked or it's too hot. So you want to wait at least 10 minutes before you remove it from the silicone, or you just have a really delicate cake. So most of the cakes that I make on this channel are butter-based cakes. They're a little more sturdy. Yeah, so you just want to stick with cakes like that. The other question I had was whether to remove the cakes while they're still warm or cold. I tend to be always in a rush, so I remove them around 10 minutes after they've cooled in the pan, and they're pretty easy to remove at that point because they are really thin pieces of cake. I did a test though this morning, so let me show you what cakes look like when you allow them to cool all the way inside the silicone mold. So I found that there's not really any difference. Definitely more easy to handle when the cakes are cool. You can see that this one just popped out really easily. This is box cake mix, and there's hardly any kind of crumbs left over in there. So it's definitely easier to remove when they're completely cool. But like I said, around 10 minutes has always been good for me.